kind of trying to figure out how things go.
Yeah, certainly.
Yes.
The last couple jobs I had.
Yeah. Sorry, just a quick pause here. Friends, we're recording again. I forgot to press the power button on the power bar, and so the recording stopped, but I think we should still have the previous recording, and we're just going to carry on in this conversation about, is it more difficult for adults, or why is it more difficult seemingly for adults to find friendships? That's what we're talking about. Yeah. So we're just in the midpoint. Frank was asking me a question. His question was, I was just telling how I usually don't struggle socially, but his question was, is it because I was born that way? Mm-hmm. That's were you thinking of the song by what's her name?
We're not talking about your sexual orientation here. We're talking about your social orientation.
I was saying, no, I personally don't think it was because I was born this way. So the contrast I was suggesting to Frank was, in your job as you're at the top of your field. You're a doctor overseeing this research facility, and you've got people who are working underneath you. You've got a lot of responsibilities. If I were to step into your role right now, I would be so lost. It'd take me like decades to try and catch up to where you're at. Sure. I would feel incompetent. Right. Until I worked through the all that I needed to. Right. You, however, are fine-tuned in this area. You're like, you're doing the thing.
Well, I mean, I'm specialized, right? And it took me decades to get to this point. Okay. So, I was just like, I was good at science as a kid, so I went into science, and I went to school for over a decade. Yeah.
In the same way, Frank, I would say I feel specialized, but that specialization needed work.
Right.
Over decades. So for me, I've just been honing my skill with watching social dynamics, seeing how I'm integrating, seeing what the response is like, trying this, trying that. And so perhaps why I feel so confident and able to engage isn't because I was born this way, but because I had to work hard at it. To such an extent, Frank, that even now, as I'm thinking about what I want to share with the world, I'm often thinking, how would I explain this to someone so that they can have the same experience? That's why I started my whole platform online as an Uber driver, is to say, hey, here's my experience right now. Let me see if I can break it down for other Uber drivers so that they can have some access to what I experience, because it's not unique to me. I can share this and others can practice it to do really well as well. Same thing, like I would be able to do well at your job, but I had to work really hard at it.
So this is your vocation. This is like this is a lifetime of trial, error, experimentation.
I just wasn't getting paid for it.
Human interaction.
Absolutely, it just wasn't getting paid for it, and yet, for me, it wasn't about getting paid for it. For me, this is what it means to be human. Right. At the very heart of it, for me, like I would say, my existence, like everyone else, is to try and find out where is your purpose being expressed, and how can you walk into it? How can you discover that in the midst of community? There are some professionals, Frank, who I've met in the context of my Uber rides, who are so they're at the top of their game, and yet they're fumbling in royal ways that brings their level of enjoying life way down, because they don't know how to communicate with others. And that's the necessity, right? We're in community, right? And what does it look like if I want to be friends or not friends, but to still get along in social community, expressing ideas, expressing expectations and boundaries and all those kind of things in such a way that we're going to survive at the end, without the mental sort of burden of saying, oh man, my life sucks because this person's in it. Something like that.
Right.
Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why I would say, like, whereas you're saying, like, with most people, and I love, Frank, can I just tell you how much I love that you're in this group here? Because there are so many people who can relate to you. Frank was saying earlier, in case,
I'm always the devil's advocate next to these two extroverts. Right?
But I like that. You see, we're not about, here's the thing, the depth of our friendship isn't one where we're making it easy for each other. We're not like saying, I'm going to agree with whatever you say so you don't look bad. We're saying, actually, I'm not sure if I agree with you on this point here. I'm going to push back on this one here, even as we engage privately or, on camera. The thing is, the depth of our friendship is pushed further because we aren't taking it easy on each other. We're trying to help each other move up in our expression of what it means to be us, right? So when you're hearing my ideas, you're like, Binyam, have you considered this side over here? Make sure you're not forgetting this element here. And you're suggesting those things just to say, Binyam, we care for you and we want to make sure that you're seeing everything you need to see, and vice versa, right? And even if we don't agree, it doesn't mean that our worth has diminished in each other's eyes, let alone ourselves, right? Just the fact that we may not see eye to eye doesn't mean, for example, that, oh man, I guess my friendship with Joshua now is at stake. Not at all, right? But because we have already established that before the ideas that we're talking about, as important as they are important, we value our persons first. Saying, I'm glad that you're in my life, regardless of, hey, you may make a really stupid decision, Frank, and yet I'll still be there for you, kind of thing, right?
Right.
Yeah, we had this interjection in podcasts way long ago when we were talking about what would we say this is a breaking point for me, right? And remember we were talking about we were talking about if you did something so bad, okay, I'll come and bail you out. But if you move past a certain line where it's like, Binyam, that is really out of line, that's when you'd be like expressing new boundaries and saying, as much as I care for you, I think this is where our engagement is going to shift.
Everyone's out of line, right?
I think so. Yeah. So saying all that, again, back to the question that we're talking about here with difficulties expressed in expressing friendships, and we're suggesting, I think, by consensus, a huge obstacle, not the only one, but the significant one, it would be fear that keeps people debilitated from ever expressing interest in connecting with others, because the stories are really compelling and really challenging to get over. Do you think that fear element in some way grows in power from youth, where they're still having their own difficulties? Does that become more formidable as the years go on, or what is it that continues to keep the difficulty factor there for so many?
I think for me, it's sort of like I had a life situation that was very difficult for many years, and I kind of lost myself in that situation to the point where I had a number of years where I literally had no friends, and at that point, the fear factor is at an all-time high, right? And so as my life situation improved, and as I came out of my shell a little bit more, and it really, for me, it started to dwindle. But it was very life situation driven, and then reinforced by some of these kind of negative experiences I had when I was a teenager. It didn't help that a lot of my really good childhood friends moved away, so they moved to other cities. So yeah, I was literally all of a sudden faced with a very, very busy life, and the friends that I did have moved away, and then it just kind of got became more and more recluse as a result. So yeah, fear was at that point was an all-time high. So I think every person is going to be situationally dependent. What drives that fear factor up, and I don't think it's a linear trajectory. But I mean, for me, what gives me hope, at least, is that as things improved, as my life became easier, it just kind of I needed a catalyst, and that was sort of like taking a brave step for me, and that was kind of approaching someone that I hadn't approached for a long time, just being approach someone, hey, let's do something outside of work. And that kind of started a chain reaction where over a number of years, I started to accumulate more and more friends. And so right now, I feel like I have the number of friends that I want. And I feel really grateful for that. And also I feel like that's given me confidence. And so I'm now at a stage where I think I could approach new people more easily as an adult, with this easygoing mindset, without making sort of understanding that everyone has busy lives, and just cherishing and enjoying the times that we can schedule together. Beautiful. Or happen to be able to make work. But otherwise, not really kind of making a big deal, out of unavailabilities and that kind of thing. But I also feel like I've found a lot of really genuine people, so that also helps. Right. So this is kind of like, I've kind of come to that peak of my fear and the peak of recluseness and loneliness, and I feel like I've come out of it.
Yes.
And I found a path forward, and I feel like I have a mindset to continue progressing that in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I just I agree with all of what you're saying. Obviously your own disclosures, I can't agree nor disagree, but I hear them. But yes, confidence can fluctuate from a variety of things throughout one's lifespan. One being, your current status in terms of your friend or social environment, whether you're, kind of isolated at the time or not, which I guess, really can alter or change in various directions through the lifespan. But the more that you have other friends, I guess that's kind of where I was getting at with the example of 500 people in a room. It's like, or you walk up to a group of people, 10 people, whatever it is, and even if I know one person,
that's good.
I feel comfortable, and I can. It depends on how I know them.
It's that anchor person.
You need that anchor person, and you can connect in, and it's not a problem. If you know more, even easier. Man, if you're in an environment where you know all 9 and there's one new person, no problem.
Even better.
No problem at all.
So, let me just push the envelope a little bit, because you just jogged this for me, Frank, when you were sharing there too, and that is, as I was listening to you, I couldn't help but think you got to a different place where you're presently at now because of awareness. Right? When you understood something, it made it a lot easier to be able to face. When I was in math, like Joshua, you're a math whiz. Math was fun for me if I understood it. If I didn't understand it, it was hell. It was like, this is not fun for me, right? So in the same way, I would say in the conversation, because a lot of people maybe just don't know how to understand what's happening in this mix. They're just like, really, they don't know what's going on, right? And when they don't know what's going on, it can seem really overwhelming. You're like at the mercy of these things that are happening internally, and you just don't know how to make sense. Your career is premised on helping people make sense of what's going on internally here. Do you know what I'm saying? Because they don't have access. And after they've had a chance to sit down with your services, they have a lot more awareness to be able to get out of the rut that they're in and find some stability and progression out of their mix. Same thing I would suggest for what's going on here is because people just maybe haven't had a chance like I have to really hone in and make this their, what do you call it, my calling or something? This is something that's familiar for me, but because so many people have not understood what's happening here, they don't have the building blocks or the the right tools to be able to say, when I have this opportunity, instead of going the usual trajectory that I go here, which is like kind of thing, I have these other options here. Which one am I going to work on or grow in my ability to be able to work towards something that helps me face the fear factor? The reality is that for every single one of us, we have, there's this me, myself, we've made it 100% through all of the crap we've gone through already. Here we are, we're sitting here, every single one who's listening and everyone, we face some stuff in our life. And
nothing's killed us yet.
Nothing's killed us yet. Now, sometimes we may have faced it like with less grace than we would like to, or whatever else, but nonetheless, we've made it through, right? And so we're learning and growing as we're on this journey in life. What does it look like, though, to be able to intentionally bolster with some helpful building blocks what could be in this context of expressing the desire that's on all of our hearts? I think the reason why this is a desire for all of us and why we're even talking about this, friendship is a beautiful gift. It's a beautiful gift where you get to experience this world not alone. Being alone is a difficult thing. There's so many people who are feeling alone. But what does it look like when you find that beautiful gift of someone who comes and entwines their life with yours, accepts you for who you are, and encourages you along the way? That's a beautiful thing, right? And so with people really wanting and desiring and longing for this, that's a good desire, right? And the fact that they're not experiencing it, maybe it's just that they don't have an awareness of which way should I go now. And perhaps a good starting place would be maybe finding some tools to, first of all, get aware of self, so you know where your challenges are in moving forward, right? Which way am I going to go here? Which way am I going to pivot? If I'm an introvert, for example, sorry, I don't know why I mentioned to you. If I'm an introvert, I'm most likely not going to find myself walking into a room of 500 people and finding my place there. But what's the small incremental step I can do in trying to express this legitimate desire of myself as a human being, which is just like every human being, to find that place where they're safe, emotionally, socially, like mentally. Where's that expression going to be in a safe space? Who are the people in our lives that we have always admired, for example, and said, I would love to be closer to that with that person? Wouldn't it be really sad to find out on their deathbed, when it's too late, that they had the same interest in you as well? There's a royal opportunity squandered, a lifetime there, you know.
Take initiative and use courage and.
Yes, but in choosing the path of courage, I would also say, first of all, doing some prerequisite work, and that is reminding yourself, psyching yourself into this reality that you don't know what's in someone else's mind. And when the fear narrative says they don't like you, that's one alternative that could be possible. But it's unfair to just stay with that one alternative. That's unrealistic, but that's what we always stick on. What are the other options? Oh, this person could really be into me. That's the other end of the spectrum. Or they could be anywhere in between. Is that a place where we can
grow that like?
Absolutely.
Maybe they don't know, and
absolutely.
Maybe an opportunity.
So if you can consider those stories in your mind of what could be, not only just this one here, but also saying what else is there here? And basically, I have no idea unless I ask, and it would be really unfair for me to call the shots for someone and say, hey, they're mean or whatever else, or they're not interested. That's really an unkind thing to do for someone else, not to give them their voice. If I were to come to you and say, hey, I think this is who you are and how you operate, that would be really ignorant on my part, because I have no idea or access to your mind. How can I not give you the courtesy of saying, I don't know what's in your mind? Would you be willing to share with me? That's a vulnerable thing, but honestly, this is one of those challenges that you have to experience in life and putting yourself out there. After we leave Joshua's house here tonight, Frank and I have no guarantee that we're going to make it home.
This is true.
Do you know what I'm saying? When we acknowledge what's outside of our control, we're able to face risk.
Yeah,
with some mitigation there, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, this is like a metaphor, right? Like,
it is.
Like, there's a 99% chance that we're going to make it home. But
Frank,
there's
I would say round up to 100.
But there's a small chance that I have a head-on collision with some semi and I'm dead.
What I'm saying, Frank, is life... this is one of the things I love that Joshua has really influenced me, is how can we become more comfortable with the unknowns in life? Meaning that we don't have all the answers, we don't have everything in the way that we want to see it flow. So when I'm like leaving here, Frank, I'm saying, hey, I'm going to do what I usually do in being careful, all that kind of stuff as far as is in my control, but I'm also acknowledging the things that are beyond my control. I'm acknowledging the things beyond my control and what's in someone else's mind. And the only way I can be fair with this individual is to say, Frank, I'm interested in connecting with you deeply as a friend. That's my intention. Engage with me. Do you feel the same way, for example? No? Oh, that's great. Okay, I want to give you full autonomy there, and, you know, find your happy place. I'll go find my own, right? But expressing that
Usually
interest.
That's not the way those initial conversations go, though.
It's not. But do you see, Joshua, what you just said is usually not the way, because people don't do it. And yet I find the necessity in doing it and finding intentions. Frank, didn't you and I have that kind of a conversation very early in our friendship, saying, okay, I'm interested in you. I want to hang out more with you.
Yes.
Same thing with you, Joshua. Isn't that the case?
I honestly don't remember a specific conversation. It's
do you
been
remember
a long
me saying?
time, so.
Do you remember me saying you're like the white version of me, and we're gonna like we knew right off the bat this is gonna go well.
Yeah, I remember.
There was that expression. There was that. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, friends, if you're seeing what was going on here, this was intentional. It wasn't by accident. It was a way of expressing intention vulnerably and saying this is the trajectory we want to go. Same thing in relationships. That's what I do. I take the deep dive and saying, hey, I'm interested in you. I want to have a relationship. I want to connect with you in this way. When I state that, I want them to be very clear about what my intentions are. I also want to know what their intentions are, right? But that way I found it really helpful to just cut through a hole of ambiguous, oh, I wonder if they like me or not, or that kind of thing. You're giving them their voice by asking them and inquiring that way. It takes guts, but what in life isn't a risky thing, right? What in life is not a risky thing when we're like engaging? Most of us have moved into this zone of comfort zone, right? And in our comfort zone, we can sit back and relax and not really feel compelled to stretch or grow.
So, Binyam, I have a question.
Okay.
If I'm someone that has a lot of low self-esteem and a really poor confidence level, and I don't really think I have a lot of interesting things to say, how do I build my confidence to the point where I can make those kind of bold moves?
Great question. For such an individual, because there are so many people, and thank you for that question. I'd love to hear your thoughts too, Joshua. I would say for such an individual who feels, I don't have much to bring to the table, I'm quite ordinary, there's not much going on here, I'm nothing extraordinary. I would say let me address the reasoning part and then the practical part. The reasoning part goes along this lines. No one has ever walked through your shoes before to see life from your perspective. And yet you've made it through a whole bunch of crap in life already to this very point. No one has actually walked through your shoes and learned the insights in the way that you have. And only you have that unique accessibility to be able to share with the world from your vantage point what life looks like, that it could enrich someone else. That's at a very reasoning point there, right? And on top of that, you are no less in worth than any of the 7 billion people in this world. If it's so that none of us is perfect, we're all kind of messy trying to figure our way forward, there's an equality there amongst all of us as we're trying to figure out life. Now, some may have a more exciting life, you know, because they did all this and they jumped off and had these adrenaline moments and they've got stories that are like captivating thousands of people, whereas you may have just had a really normal, ordinary growing up period and you're like, there's not much here. And yet, your specific experience is one that no one has access to, that could be very instrumental in enabling someone else in their own experience to put two things together and say, oh, I didn't see that. And they never would have gotten there if you hadn't been willing to share. Every single one of us, Frank can say, every single one of us has something to be able to share. And I think it's an unfortunate disservice when we celebrate some as more important than others. I would happily sit down with one of my favorite actors who may be, let's say, Denzel Washington. I really enjoyed Denzel Washington. I would sit down with him and have a grand time learning his experiences. But do you know who I'd prioritize more before Denzel Washington? The bum that I see walking up and down 17th Avenue on crutches at a very slow pace a few times a day, like almost every day. And he, like, people make space for him, right? He's got a story. He's got a really... I would love to hear his story. I'd love to sit down with the individual who can challenge me and say, Binyam, there's not much going on here. And by the time we're done the conversation, my experience with those individuals has been, they're like, okay, there's something more here. Just because I spoke worth. Now, the reality, the practical part is they don't see worth there, Frank, because they haven't been able to think in terms of value in reference to self. Like, they diminish their worth. They're like, there's not much here.
Can I jump in and say... you're a rare person by valuing these people in these types of ways as you're describing.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't have people like you in their lives. And instead they have other people that are struggling with their own emotions and have lacks all around, deficits, weaknesses, not to say you don't, of course. Social struggles, etc., where they treat these people, for example, all they want from them is their money, or is something that they can give. They're very, it's very narcissistic, their perspective on others. And when they're in that environment, it's legit, absolutely very, very difficult to develop a sense of, I do have value.
Yes.
When you're surrounded by people that literally do not value you.
And they don't.
Now, that doesn't mean that the person doesn't have value.
No,
and I agree with you.
Yeah.
But when they're in a context where no one thinks that the person is valuable, it's very hard to change your perspective and start to believe I have value. Which is to say, part of, and I'm not saying this is an easy thing by no means, is about changing your context.
And that was this part 2 for me, the practical part. You see, the first part was just the reasoning part in saying, here's how I use reason and logic to be able to say you do have worth. But the second part is the critical part, and that is the feeling part. This person is saying, I don't feel it, right? I don't see it, because like you were saying, Joshua, they've been in this environment that is not actually invested that worth. And this is where I would say, we weren't made to live life on our own in solo. And there's nothing wrong with an assist from a community. You know what I'm saying? To have an assist of having someone who can say, I'm going to believe for you what you don't believe for yourself is a beautiful gift. And a really important one. Do you know what I'm saying? So what would it look like for you to consider the people in your life, or people that you've seen on the sidelines who you think may be safe people, who you could walk alongside and say, hey, I'm struggling in this way. Now, this is, again, a risky thing to extend yourself and express interest and ask for help. It's a beautiful time in history where we live in right now, where we affirm those who are going to get mental health, for example, where once upon a time that was really stigmatized. It was like, you're doing what's wrong with you kind of thing, right? But today it's like a part of self-care, you know, to be able to go and attend to your mind and make sure that everything is going well in the way you're processing or thinking through things. And there's nothing wrong with being able to do that and saying, hey, what does it look like for me to go and look for help, ask someone to be able to step in and help bolster you. You're feeling low right now. There's nothing shameful about looking for those people who are going to start that process of building into you and reminding you of your worth. It takes time to get out of that rut. I would agree. But like you were saying, change that context. Change the people who you're around. And if you can't change the people, add people into the context who are going to counteract those effects or influences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Love it.
So then sort of like you get that reinforcement.
Yes.
Positive reinforcement to counteract the negative reinforcement.
And the challenging part there is even just reaching out for such a person who's already at a low. I'm understanding what I'm asking here. You don't have anything left to be able to extend by way of courage, perhaps. But what would it look like for you to like consider those people who you're like, I think they're safe people. What do you have left to lose? What do you have left to lose to at least express interest? Here's what I do for myself. Here's what Joshua does. Here's what Frank does. We're saying we kind of rely on each other for friendship, for camaraderie, for accountability, for like all these things. Do you see how we're expressing our neediness on each other? Yes, in some level, we need to be aware of our own, you know, responsibilities and so on. But yet in community, the beautiful part of a community is that we're able to experience that level of becoming better because we were a part of something bigger than ourselves. You're about to say something else.
No, that sounds brilliant. I think the only thing I would add is sort of like, you know, in terms of building the confidence and the sense of self-worth to, you know, kind of strive forward into the unknown and try to engage with people and try to build new connections. Honestly, I think it could also be just as simple as practice, you know, and certainly like for me, it was, like once I kind of had made that one new friend as an adult, that just got the ball rolling for everything else. And I started to realize like, yes, I can do this, and yes, I can initiate, and yes, I can deal with rejection, and yes, I can. It's okay if stuff doesn't work out, but it's also awesome if it does. So yeah, it was sort of just like I just needed something to go right, and then once it did, I felt I think just this massive confidence boost.
Brilliant.
Absolutely. In the world of psychology, you know, when we struggle with anxiety, we prescribe exposure therapy. Practice makes anxious.
So is that when you like someone has arachnophobia, like do you put them in a box full of spiders until they not scared anymore?
That's one application of exposure therapy. Well, I don't know about putting them in a box of spiders. Maybe graduated exposure. But yeah, anyways.
Guys, we are, I think, coming to the end of our time. We may even be a little bit over, but can I just get some final thoughts from you gentlemen before we cue the outro music?
Am I going to go first?
Sure, Frank. Or you don't have to. You don't have to.
Why don't you go first? Okay. I got to
sure totally thing. Absolutely. Yeah. Frank, I really, again, in my final comments, I'm addressing you. I appreciate your input because you're thinking along the lines that so many out there are probably at. And sometimes, oh, by the way, just before I carry my thought, would you just feature for our audience your socks, Frank?
Oh, did I not do that already?
You did that off camera. I mean, like, if we haven't been recording. So
there they are.
We always feature Frank's colorful socks because he... It's like the mascot of our show.
There we go. Yeah.
But no, I appreciate your input, Frank, because you're asking the question for so many where they're presently at. And sometimes for people like Joshua and I, who are probably in a different experiential place, it's more challenging to think along those lines and say, how can I serve those that we're endeavoring to serve by trying to understand when I don't have access? And so I really appreciate your input, the questions, the devil's advocate's role that you play along those lines, because again, it nuances, especially for the point of need there. You know, the last monologue that I just did for like, I don't know, 20 minutes there was in relation to your question, but I think it's going to serve so many, because at a practical level, we do want to serve those who are listening into this conversation. And so, and then the final thought there for me would be, the biggest challenge perhaps for most of you, in my observation, is just overcoming that fear with a boost of courage to extend yourself and express interest in others, saying, hey, I'm interested. This for me is what it means to be human, is to connect or learn how to connect with others, so that together as we share experiences from a point of equality, because we're trying to figure it out, something beautiful forms, and we call that friendship. Mm-hmm.
My last thought, I'm just going to take it on a different tangent, which is, you know, we talked about lack of time. We all get busy, and I think obviously that's true. The more that we are, you know, our careers or our talents become in demand, the more that our assistants, you know, as parents, for example, become in demand, the more that we just get pulled into all of these activities, these things that we should do, and in many cases they're good, but in some cases we don't need to, and we do it because we have to be successful. Well, what is successful in your career, for example? So what my encouragement is to the listeners is that, you know, I think having good, solid friendships is one very key component of being successful in life. And so devote time, go out of your way, devote energy and efforts into those aims, and don't just wait until your schedule just might have time to fit into something as friendship wise into it. Instead, make the effort to take other things off of your plate, so that you have some intentional times to invest in good quality friendships. And at the end of your life, when you look back at that decision, I can pretty much guarantee you won't regret that.
Love it. Love it.
My final thought is just, I guess, having been through the ebbs and flows of feeling like it's difficult to make friends as an adult, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and yeah, like these guys said, make the time and practice and be brave, put yourself out there, and it'll pay dividends. So there is hope for friendship as an adult. Absolutely.
Cool.
You guys don't know it, I just posted a video today where I spoke about the most impacting moment I had as an Uber driver.
Okay.
And I just said in my video very briefly that this individual is dropping off. As he was about to get out of my vehicle, he said, just so you know, I was about to end my life tonight. But because of the conversation,
deep.
I know. But I mean, we've been talking a lot about some of the struggles he'd been going through, and I encouraged him along the way. Because of our conversation, he was like, yeah, I'm not going to do it. Like, I'm still going to try and work through this here. But why I mentioned that was because the final words he said to me were, the final words he said was, Binyam, please don't stop talking to us. Please don't stop talking. In essence, what he was saying is, what we were saying here is, extend yourself.